The conference room on the 43rd floor of the Beaumont Tower smelled like money and contempt, and Lena Ashford had spent the last 6 months learning to breathe both. She sat alone on the left side of the long glass table, wearing a blazer she had ironed 3 times that morning. No legal team behind her, no assistant, just a yellow notepad and a pen she had borrowed from the lobby receptionist, because the one in her bag had run out of ink on the elevator ride up. Across the table, her soon-to-be ex-husband, Damien Beaumont, leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. He did own the room. His family's name was on the building. His father's portrait hung in the lobby. His company's logo was embossed on every door handle from the ground floor to the penthouse. He was looking at Lena the way he always looked at people he considered beneath him. Not with anger, but with the particular boredom of someone who has already decided the outcome. Lena. He said her name like it was a minor inconvenience. You really don't have representation? She looked up from her notepad. I couldn't find anyone available on such short notice. This was a lie. She had found someone. She had told them to stay home. The woman beside Damien, his lead attorney, Catherine Voss, set a stack of papers on the table with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had already won. Voss was in her mid-50s, silver-haired, and wore the expression of a person who billed $400 an hour and wanted everyone in the room to know it. Mrs. Ashford, Voss said without looking up from her documents. Your husband has been more than fair. Given the prenuptial agreement and the length of the marriage, the settlement offer of $15,000 and 30 days to vacate the house represents a significant generosity. Generosity, Lena repeated softly. You brought nothing into this marriage, Damien said, and the words landed with the casual brutality of someone who had rehearsed them and decided they sounded reasonable. No assets, no capital, no professional standing. You were a graphic designer working out of a basement apartment when I met you. I gave you a life. The third person at the table, a junior associate named Patrick who looked barely 25, had the decency to study his shoes. Lena looked at Damien. She had loved him once, genuinely, in the way that young women sometimes love men who make them feel chosen. She had spent 4 years supporting his world, hosting dinners for his investors, smoothing over his social gaffes, redesigning the Beaumont Group's entire visual identity without ever appearing on the invoice. She had done all of it quietly, the way she did most things, because she was good at being invisible. She was very, very good at being invisible. You're right, she said. I didn't bring capital into the marriage. Damien smiled. It was the smile of a man closing a deal. But, Lena continued, her voice entirely calm, I need about 10 more minutes before we proceed. I'm expecting something. Voss looked up. Miss Ashford, this isn't a deposition. We don't have time for. The glass doors of the conference room opened. The woman who walked in wore a charcoal blazer that did not announce itself but somehow filled the room. She was perhaps 60, with close-cropped silver hair and the posture of someone who had never in her life needed to prove she belonged somewhere. Behind her came 2 younger associates carrying identical black leather portfolios. Damien frowned. Who are you? The woman did not look at him immediately. She walked to Lena's side of the table, set a slim folder down, and then, only then, turned to face the room. My name is Margot Ellery, she said. I'm a senior partner at Ellery, Chow and Associates in Vancouver. I don't typically handle divorce proceedings. She paused with the precision of someone who knew exactly how a pause worked. But I make exceptions for certain clients. Catherine Voss had gone very still. I know that name, Patrick said, mostly to himself. Ellery Chow? They handled the Northgate acquisition. The one that restructured a $2 billion real estate portfolio in 11 days. Margot said pleasantly, yes, that one. Lena folded her hands on the table and said nothing. Damien leaned forward. Whatever she's paying you, Lena cannot afford your rates. This is a stunt, Mr. Beaumont. Margot opened the folder with one hand. I'm not here about what your wife can afford. I'm here because as of 9 o'clock this morning, the company she founded, quietly, anonymously, over the past 6 years, completed a transaction that I suspect your financial team hasn't caught up to yet. She placed a single document in the center of the table. Ashford Design Holdings acquired a controlling interest in the Beaumont Group's primary commercial property trust. The room went silent the way rooms go silent when something irreversible has just happened. Damien stared at the paper. He didn't pick it up. That's impossible. His voice had changed. Something had slipped out of it. That portfolio is held by 3 independent funds. It's not publicly traded. No, Lena said quietly, it isn't, which is why it took me 2 years to acquire the right positions. She looked at him for the first time without any of the apology she had trained herself to carry. You always said I wasn't paying attention to your business. You were right. I was paying attention to mine. Damien pushed back from the table. This is a fabrication. You're bluffing. You're a graphic designer, Lena. You make logos. She made yours, Margot said crisply. The one currently on every piece of communication your company sends. The one that won a Canadian Design Award in 2019. Which Ms. Ashford designed under contract uncredited, because you told her it would complicate things professionally if people knew the CEO's wife was doing his brand work. She tilted her head slightly. I have the original files, the correspondence, and the contract you had her sign under a numbered company. Catherine Voss had set down her pen. Lena reached into her bag and placed a small matte black USB drive on the table. She simply set it down. That contains 6 years of work, she said, the brand architecture, the investor presentation templates, the annual report layouts, the environmental graphics for all 12 Beaumont properties. She paused. I did all of it. My name appears on none of it. And every invoice was processed through a shell account Damien set up so it wouldn't appear in the marital financial disclosures. Damien looked at Catherine Voss. Catherine Voss was looking at the USB drive with the expression of a lawyer who had just understood the shape of a problem she had not been told about. Damien, she said very quietly. Is this accurate? He said nothing. The thing about Lena Ashford was that she had not come from money. She had grown up in a rented duplex in Moncton, New Brunswick, where her mother worked nights at the hospital and her father did seasonal construction work. She had been the kid in school who could draw anything. Copied band logos onto notebooks, designed the graduation poster by hand, made signs for the corner store that people still commented on 20 years later. She had put herself through NSCAD on student loans and part-time work. She had graduated with a degree in communication design and a portfolio that was genuinely exceptional and a bank account that was genuinely not. She had freelanced for 5 years, building a client list slowly and carefully, before meeting Damien at a brand strategy conference in Toronto, where she had been a presenter, and he had been in the audience looking for someone to redesign what he called the visual mess my grandfather left behind. She had redesigned it. He had taken her to dinner to say thank you. They had dated for 2 years before he proposed, in a restaurant on the 34th floor of a hotel she would never have booked for herself. She had said yes because she loved him and because she was 28. And because she had not yet understood that some men love women the way they love useful things, completely, until they want something newer. The marriage had been, in the beginning, genuinely good. Damien was charming when he tried, and he tried often in the early years. But as his business expanded and his confidence solidified, the dynamic shifted in the particular way that dynamics shift when one person's world gets bigger and the other person's is slowly made smaller. He stopped crediting her contributions. He started introducing her as my wife, with the emphasis on the possessive. He told her once, gently, that it made him look bad to have people know his wife was doing work for his company, as though her competence were a thing he needed to be protected from. She kept doing the work. She just stopped telling people, and in the hours she had left over, in the evenings when Damien was at dinners she wasn't invited to, she built something else. It had started small. A few design clients she kept entirely separate from the Beaumont world, billed through a numbered company she'd set up on her own. Then a small stake in a friend's branding agency in Calgary. Then a larger stake. Then quietly, a holding company. Then several holding companies. She had the kind of mind that could look at a business and see exactly where it was bleeding, and she had spent 4 years watching Damien's business up close. She knew which of his properties were underperforming. She knew which of his investors were looking for an exit. She knew which of his fund managers were replaceable and which ones were actually holding everything together. She had not set out to acquire the Beaumont Commercial Trust. But when the opportunity appeared, 18 months ago, she recognized it the way she recognized a bad logo. Immediately and without any doubt, she bought on. Damien had filed for divorce 3 months later. She suspected it was a coincidence. She also suspected it didn't matter. I want to be very clear about what this means legally, Mark said, addressing Catherine Voss with the collegiality of two professionals discussing the weather. As of this morning, Ashford Design Holdings holds a 34% interest in Beaumont Commercial Trust, enough to trigger a material shareholder review under the terms of the trust's own governance documents. That review includes, as you'll know, an audit of all related party transactions. Catherine Voss closed her eyes briefly. The undisclosed invoices processed through the numbered account, Margot continued, constitute undeclared marital income. They also constitute, depending on how your client's accountant structured things, a potential reporting issue with the CRA. She said it gently, the way a surgeon describes a complication. We are not here to make threats. We are here because my client would like a fair settlement. I want the house, Lena said. She hadn't planned to say it that simply. But there it was. Damien turned to her. His face had gone through several things in the last 10 minutes and had landed somewhere between fury and disbelief. "The house is worth $3 million, he said. "I know. I also know what it appraised for before I spent 14 months renovating it, and it was worth considerably less." She looked at the table. "I picked the fixtures. I managed the contractors. I lived in a construction site for a year because you were traveling and it was easier for you if someone was on site." She looked up. "I want the house, I want the credit for the Beaumont rebrand formally documented, and I want the settlement to reflect my actual contribution to this marriage." "You're threatening me," Damien said. "No." Lena's voice was even. "I'm negotiating. This is what it looks like." There was a long pause. Patrick had stopped looking at his shoes and was now watching Lena with an expression that, in other circumstances, might have been called admiring. Catherine Voss leaned toward Damien and said something in a low voice. He shook his head once. She said something else. He went very still. "The shareholder review," he said finally, to Margot. "If we reach a settlement today, a fair one, would Ashford Design Holdings withdraw the review request?" Margot looked at Lena. Lena let the silence last exactly long enough. "That would depend on the terms." The negotiation took 4 hours. It was not the 4 hours Damien had planned on spending in this building today. Catherine Voss was, Lena had to admit, a genuinely skilled lawyer, and the fact that she was now working in Lena's direction rather than against her made an observable difference. Voss had figured out very quickly which way things were going and had pivoted with the professionalism of someone who understood that her long-term reputation mattered more than any single client. By 3 o'clock, Lena had the house. She had formal documentation of her creative contribution to the Beaumont Group. She had a settlement figure that did not insult her. And Ashford Design Holdings retained its position in the commercial trust, a position that Damien's team would now have to manage around for the foreseeable future, because Lena was, as of today, one of his largest shareholders, and she had no intention of being invisible about it. When Damien finally signed, he set down the pen and looked at her for a moment. "I never thought you were paying attention," he said. It wasn't an apology, it was closer to an observation. "I know," Lena said. "That's the whole thing, Damien. That's the whole thing." She stood up, shook Margot's hand, nodded to Patrick, who nodded back with something in his eyes that suggested he would be thinking about this meeting for a while, and walked out of the conference room. The elevator ride down 43 floors was quiet. Lena stood with her yellow notepad under her arm and watched the numbers drop and thought about the morning her father had driven her to the bus station in Moncton with her portfolio case and 2 garbage bags full of clothes and said, in the way he said things, simple and without flourish, "Don't let anybody make you feel like nothing." She had let somebody. For a while, she was done with that now. The lobby of Beaumont Tower was all marble and ambient light, and the portrait of Damien's grandfather on the east wall, looking stern and certain in the way only men who have never had to earn their certainty can look. Lena walked past it without stopping. Outside, Margot was waiting on the sidewalk, turning up her collar against the October wind coming off the harbor. "The filing for the brand attribution documentation will go through by end of week," Margot said. "The house transfer takes 30 days, but there's nothing to contest. It's clean." "Good." Lena pulled on her own coat. The street was full of the ordinary Tuesday afternoon business of the city. Couriers, lunch crowds, someone's golden retriever pulling its owner toward a storefront. "Send me the invoice, the real one, with your name on it." Margot smiled, briefly. "I intend to." Lena walked toward the parking garage on the next block. Her phone buzzed. A message from her studio manager, a woman named Jo, who had been with her since the Calgary days and who communicated almost exclusively in bullet points. "Board deck approved. New client signed. Also the Harrington account wants to add 2 more properties. Also your 4 o'clock is asking if they can move to 4:30. Lena typed back, "Yes to 4:30. Tell Harrington yes. Well done on the deck." She got into her car. It was not a remarkable car. It was practical and reliable and exactly what she'd chosen because she needed something that started in January and fit a bike rack, which were her 2 criteria. She had never bought things to signal anything. She bought things because they worked. She sat for a moment before starting the engine. There was a version of this story where she was angry. And she had been angry for a while. In the months after Damien filed, in the weeks when her lawyer friends were telling her, the prenup was airtight, and the settlement offer was probably as good as it would get, she had sat in her home studio at 2 in the morning, looking at the numbers and feeling the specific cold fury of a person who has done real work that has been made to disappear. But the anger had not lasted, because she had something to do with it. She had redirected it, turned it into focus the way she always did, and she had worked. She had worked very hard, very quietly for a long time. She started the car. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. A business column, something she was subscribed to. The headline read, Beaumont Group faces surprise shareholder review as anonymous holding company reveals major stake. She skimmed the first paragraph, then set the phone face down on the passenger seat. She pulled out of the parking garage and drove toward the studio, toward the 4:30 meeting, toward the Harrington account and the new client, and all the ordinary machinery of a business that had been built carefully and over a long time and that belonged, without qualification, to her. 6 weeks later, a journalist from a national business magazine called and asked if she would sit for a profile. She said yes, which surprised some people who had watched the last 2 months unfold and expected her to remain in the background. She did not remain in the background. The profile ran on a Tuesday. The headline was something she had not suggested and would not have chosen, but she understood why they used it. The designer who bought her ex-husband's building. Without him knowing. Her phone rang for 3 days straight. Former clients. Potential clients. 2 speaking invitations. A podcast. A woman who had read the piece on her lunch break and called the studio number to say simply, "Thank you," and then hung up before Joe could take a message. The Beaumont Group issued a statement through Catherine's saying there was no comment on the personal elements of the settlement, and that the shareholder review had been resolved to the satisfaction of all parties. Damien did not give interviews. There was one call Lena took personally on a Wednesday afternoon when the studio was quiet and her team had gone for coffee. It was from, "I need to ask you something," he said. He sounded tired in a way she hadn't heard before. The confidence was still there underneath, but something was sitting on top of it now. "How long?" She knew what he was asking. 2 years before we separated, she said. A long pause. "You were already building it when we were still." "Yes, did you know then, that you were going to leave?" She considered this honestly, the way she considered most things. "No, I built it because I needed something that was mine. Something you couldn't accidentally take credit for." She paused. "The rest happened on its own." Another long pause. "I underestimated you," he said. It came out flat, not quite an apology, not quite not one. "Yes," she said, "you did." She ended the call and went back to work. The house was hers by December. It was a 1920s craftsman in Westmount, with wide plank floors and a light-filled studio on the second floor, that she had designed herself, and that Damien had walked through exactly once during the renovation and said looked very you, which she had understood at the time as a mild criticism, and now understood as the most accurate thing he had ever said about her. She repainted the front door on a Saturday in early December, in a deep, particular shade of blue-green that she had been thinking about for 2 years. She did it herself, with a brush, in the cold. Her neighbor walked by with a dog and paused. "Love the color," the neighbor said. "Thank you." Lena stepped back to look at it. "It's called Owing Nothing." This was not true. It was called Cascade, by Benjamin Moore, and she had found it in a sample book 4 months ago. But the other thing felt right to say, on that morning, at that door, in the city that had watched her disappear and then watched her come back. She went inside. On the kitchen counter was a copy of the business magazine, folded open to her profile. She had framed nothing. She kept no trophies. The issue would end up in a recycling bag by the end of the month, and she wouldn't miss it. What she kept, propped on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, was a drawing she had made in a notebook the night before her first investor meeting 2 years ago. It was a rough sketch, not even a proper design, just a thing she'd done with a ballpoint pen while she was thinking of a door, standing open, with light behind it. She had not known then exactly what was behind the door. She had just known there was a door, and that she was the one holding it. Some people spend years waiting to be recognized. Lena Ashford had spent those same years building something that didn't require anyone's recognition to be real. That is the difference between power borrowed and power built, and if this week had proven anything, it was that Lena had always known which one she was working toward. Even when she was the only one in the room who knew it.